Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you live from Northeast Florida on the East Coast. So it's 2 o'clock where I am, 2 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday. I see we have participants in many other places around the globe, not just the United States. Welcome all. This is a 1 hour opportunity for introduction to Microsoft Project. It's kind of like you're looking to buy a new car, and so you go down to the dealer and you get to stare in the window. We're not going to test drive the product. We're not going to kick the tires. For 1 hour, we're going to look in the window and watch the car rotate as it's displayed beautifully inside of the dealership, but we're not going to go in and touch it. So I just want to kind of set your expectations for the hour that we're going to spend together here looking at this thing called Microsoft Project. So welcome all. Let me just sort of launch right into some stuff here, and we'll talk about our product. Microsoft Project is a tool, and just like if you were baking, you're going to have an oven and utensils and bowls and products that you're going to put in there and mix them up. If we were working on that car we were talking about, we would have wrenches and screwdrivers and tools support a process. Tools help us accomplish something. And so Microsoft Project all by itself doesn't really do anything unless it is following a process. And the process that Microsoft Project follows is the process of project management. And I have a saying, that's why it's the quote is from Herman here. If we add tools to questionable process, that allows you to make more mistakes faster with greater visibility and consequence. Quite frankly, it's not helpful. Using the wrong tool is not helpful. And believing that tools are going to solve your problem is also not helpful. So we have to understand both the process and the tools. Here's the process we're talking about. Standard project management language comes from Project Management Institute, PMI. Says that anytime we're going to do something that we're going to classify as a project, we're going to initiate, plan, execute, monitor, control, and close. We're going to follow this series of steps. And in each one of those, we do very specific activities, okay? So here's the standard project management process that we're going to follow. We're going to think about as we're accomplishing this thing called doing a project using a tool called Microsoft Project. Well, I have in my repertoire how I think, and I apologize, but you will be exposed to how I think for the next hour. I'm hoping that no one is harmed in the process as I try to get you to see the world like I see it. It looks like this. My planning mantra, I call them mantras because they're things that I have for memory aids. Planning mantra says, what thing are we trying to create? A problem are we trying to solve? Or process are we trying to improve? What's the big idea? A project generally has a big idea. So let's look and figure out what the big idea is. Microsoft Project has nothing to do with that. That is standard project management processes and methodologies and requirements management and a whole bunch of other fancy project words. So once we know what the big idea is, and usually the big idea comes from a customer who rushes into the customer or the boss who rushes into your office or may show up on a Zoom site near you and says, I got a great idea. Why don't we fill in the blank? What is it? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could? Wouldn't it be great if that thing could? And all of a sudden a big idea is born, and it's our responsibility using these kinds of tools to solve that big idea, to turn it into a concrete deliverable, to bring the big idea to fruition so that we have a happy customer and our client in the end of the process. So the scope box in my little diagram here, Microsoft Project doesn't do that. Project management does that. Then we turn on another feature called network diagramming. So if I know what the big idea is, now I need to figure out what are the right things to do in the right order. Now Microsoft Project begins to help us. We're going to put information into Microsoft Project, and it will help us organize our thoughts about what are the right things to do and what is the order in which I wish to accomplish them. After we figured out what that looks like, we go into an estimates process. Like, so what are the right estimates? How long should it take? How much money should it cost? It's not obvious in here, but we're going to talk about building risk into that process. What if things don't go like we planned it? How do we manage risk? And Microsoft Project is very helpful in understanding risk in deliverables. So what are the right things to do in right order? What are the right estimates? It will help us get that right. Although there's a whole bunch of other science that comes into your estimating techniques. Then we have to figure out who are the right resources. So we know what the work is. We know about how long it takes. Who's going to do it? I got to figure that out too. The tool will assist me in figuring out what the resources are, what we need, what are their efficiencies, how can they accomplish the work. A lot of information about the things that do work. Resources are things that do work. They're people and things, they're people and things that do work. So we can look and see what the resources accomplish. What are the right things doing right over the right estimates? What are the right resources? The next one says schedule validation. So it's answering the question, is the schedule good enough? Did I build it right? Does it make sense? Is it logical? Is it a doable, defensible project? Can I accomplish what I promised, what I planned? And can I pass a jury of my peers reviewing my work saying, yep, that looks like a pretty good way to get it done? So the whole idea of good enough is it doable and defensible? Can I accomplish it? Can I accomplish it? And would a jury of my peers agree with me? And then the very last step in the planning mantra, the getting ready to do work, is a thing called baselining. And it says, let's go do work. I'll show you later. It's a series of steps we'll go through, and we'll cement what I call cementing the promise. I need to save the promise. I put a plan together, and now I need to set it aside someplace and remember what it was. What did I promise? So baselining is simply remembering the original planning promise for an outcome in a project. And once we've done that, we've gone through this whole planning methodology, we go to a next step in the process, what I'm calling the tracking mantra, the tracking process. So you'll have one hat on called the planning hat. And when you baseline your project, you take off your planning hat and you put on your tracking hat. And we change the rules about how we're going to operate using the tool called Microsoft Project. So here's what the tracking mantra does for us. It says, where should you be? Well, we saved the baseline. So the baseline is what I planned to accomplish. So I'm going to look at the baseline. Then I'm going to go get the actuals. Where are you? Where should I be? Where am I? What's really happening? What did I think was going to happen and what's really happening? And I compare those two. And I get a thing called variance. Variance is the difference between two variables. So I'm going to subtract actuals from baseline, and I'm going to look at it and say, is it going like I planned it? Is it better than I thought, or is it worse than I thought? Because that's all subtraction is going to do for me. It's going to give me 0. It's going to give me a plus number or a minus number. Difference between planned and actual. So I go measure variance. Once I measure variance, that doesn't mean things are broken. It only means it's not going like you planned it. So there's another set of variables in here, which is called tolerance. It's not in my diagram, but the tolerance says how much variance are you willing to accept? Most of the time in the United States, federal projects, I have a lot of federal clients, so I spend a lot of time with the federal government. They have predefined documentation that says 10% of scope or 10% of schedule or cost. If it's within 10% of schedule or cost, then you're fine. If it's not within 10%, then we would need to ask some questions like, what am I going to do about it? The next block is my diagram says on a corrective action. What am I going to do about it? Where should I be? Where am I? What's the difference? What am I going to do about it? If it's intolerance, The answer is nothing. If it's not intolerance or it's approaching out of tolerance, then we have to make some decisions about we need to do something. We need to fix something. We need to react to the variance. Microsoft Project is extremely helpful because it's a mathematical modeling engine. It's extremely helpful in doing this analysis and helping us make decisions on that corrective action piece. Where should we apply the fix? Where's the right place to tweak our schedule, our cost, our resources in order to adjust the outcome to get closer to what we thought the baseline was? Then the next box in my diagram says rebaseline. So one of the things that can happen is it can get so out of sync, so literally broken. A schedule can be broken. And if it's broken, then what that says is I really can't deliver what I promised. So my rebaselining question says, can I still deliver the promise? In my cycle, I'm going to say, where should I be? Where am I? What's the difference? What am I going to do about it? Is the project still valid? Is it still doable? Is it still defensible? That's one of the questions I have to ask. So if I'm in tolerance, we just skip right over that. If I'm not in tolerance, I have to look at information about the future of the project. Microsoft Project supports all of these things, and make a determination of whether we need to change the plan or not, or whether I still have a doable, defensible project and we need to rethink the whole thing. Sometimes projects, I call it kill. We stop the project here. We kill the project. Don't do this. It's not working. It's not going to make sense. Let's not spend the money to do this. And so this is one of those places where we ask that question. Does it still make sense? Does it still make sense? Does it still make sense? So we have to go through that process, and then we get up to the reporting process to tell the story. Where should I be? Where am I? What's the difference between them? What am I going to do about it? Is the promise still valid? Can I still deliver the promise? If all that is fine, we tell the story, we write the reports, we do our status reporting. Microsoft Project is an excellent status tool that allows us to get our documentation in order and our story in order about what's going on with our project. And then the arrow goes back to the top and it says repeat, because if we're doing work, we're going to keep doing work until we're finished with the project. So we're going to cycle through this every week, every month, bi-monthly, whatever your reporting cycle is in your organization. You will continuously do this until we're done, until we're finished. Either we complete the project or we stop the project. All of those are options here. And Microsoft Project is extremely helpful in this tracking mechanism. So the tool itself, a thing called Microsoft Project, what does that look like? What does it do? If you take the shrink wrap off of the box and you take the thumb drive, the CD, or that download from a website, however that works, you now have on your desktop, on your usable machinery, then this thing called Microsoft Project, the software. And we're going to open it up. One of the things I want to tell you about opening up is before we actually go try to use the thing, we have to make it dance according to our rules. And so Microsoft Project is a complex but very customizable tool. You can make it function according, that's what I call dance. You can make it dance according to your specific needs by adjusting this area called options. And there's a tremendous amount of information in this options section. There's a general note. You'll see that in my, that's the one that's being displayed. There's information about how do you want to see stuff, displaying stuff. There's information about how you want the scheduling engine to work. What kind of math models do you want to apply to it? Are you going to use earned value for tracking? Are you not going to use earned value? Which type of earned value would you like to use? How do you want the information that you put into it, how do you want it to react? You want it to react instantly? You want to wait for a date-specific bit of information? How do you want this to display? What do you want it to look like? How do you want the scheduling engine to mathematically operate? How do you want it to dance according to the music that your organization is using to do project management. Proofing and saving documentation stuff. Languages are available to us, and then there's some advanced information that goes on in there. How are you going to set up your ribbons, which are our visual aids to tell us where we are and what we're accomplishing. Toolbars and some other information in there. In this little getting started box that I'm showing you here with all of this information, there's probably 300 different choices that can be made around how you want the tool to dance according to your needs, your organization, your project specific deliverables. So highly customizable. It is complex. I'm not going to kid you. There's out of the box. A lot of people are frustrated with it because they haven't set up this thing called options so that they understand when they push a button, what's supposed to happen? What does it do? How does it act? What mathematical models is it using under the condition that you described when you pushed the button and said, do this for me? So getting our setup becomes an extremely important feature in the front end of our process. After we've put it together, we've told it how we want it to dance. Then we'll just go look at a simple diagram. We opened up a blank screen. Well, this is the defaulted look of a blank screen. And I want you to see, if we start at the top and go down, we have a series of buttons at the top about show me the file, show me the task stuff, show me the resource stuff, show me the reporting stuff. You'll see that on the screen. And then below that are ribbons. Well, the ribbons change according to the information that you're trying to look at. What is it? File data? Is it test data? Is it resource data? And so the ribbons will alter according to what you're looking at, what you can do, how you're reacting to information or planning. It is all customizable here, and how you set up the ribbons and which ribbons are available, with each of the buttons that you would push, like file, task, resources. Below that, there's a feature called timeline, and the timeline is an interesting feature that was established around 2007, I believe. In the 2007 version came out. And it basically says, oh, if you add things to the timeline, that's a simple calendar view of things are going to happen, not a Gantt chart, just a simple one-line calendar view. And some folks like that feature of having the timeline on. Then below that is the window that we will be paying attention to if we're looking at Microsoft Project. And I've added some notes in there, like all the way on the left-hand side of the diagram is something called the view bar. You'll see a view bar there. The view bar will identify which view is active, or all of the views, and you can push the button and pick the one you want. And there are hundreds of views. And if there's not one you like, there's the opportunity to create your own way of seeing information in Microsoft Project, highly customizable. Then there's what I'm calling a tabular space, tabs. And so the tabs are the task, I'm looking at my screen here, task name and duration and start and finish. Those are columns. And then underneath those columns, those are kind of the tabs, or we're going to add data, we're going to add information to that. Microsoft Project is really a wonderful three-dimensional database. So those of you who are very versed in databases know we can go in and create it to capture information, to digest information, to mathematically model information. This is a three-dimensional database. And a column is the data that you're looking at, and a row is the information that you're talking about. So on the row, we put that chunk of work that we talked about earlier, and we have data points around that chunk of work. Like we're gonna write the charter for our team. Okay, writing the charter, we can look at when we plan to start, when we plan to finish, how much is it gonna cost, what resources will we assign to that, how many different variables are there? that I can attach to any task in any project. Depending on which product you purchase, it's somewhere between 1,100 and 1,600 separate and distinct variables for every task on every project in Microsoft Project. That's gigantic. No one I know uses all of the features of Microsoft Project. It can do marvelous and wonderful things. The most complex customer that I've worked with who uses Microsoft Project had 10,000 tasks in their project. It was gigantic. And they used less than 40% of the tool. A huge manufacturing, aircraft manufacturing facility. So a row is going to be a set of data, and the columns are going to be the data we're looking at. That's the idea of Microsoft Project. And it has thousands of opportunities for you to collect and capture information. And if it's not already predefined in the tool, you can go make your own. There's probably 500 different variables that you can create yourself. You can design them, define them yourself. So if the system doesn't do exactly what you want, you can create mathematical models and using VBA, write routines to make the tool dance any way you'd like. Quite customizable. Then we see there's a timeline up there. You see the timeline, that's just a calendar, but there's a separation. We had tabular data on the left, but on the right, what you have is what I call a view. It's pictures. So we have words on one side and pictures on the other. And I defined that view, and you'll see that the view we have here is the Gantt chart. It's a combination of words and pictures. You can design as many views as you can imagine. There are 65 or 70 of them that come out of take the shrink wrap off the box, and they're already available to you, but you can create your own here and how you'd like to visualize the data, both from words and pictures perspective. Quite customizable. Some folks think it's daunting. I think if we went through a course on using the tool, there's some really cool individual steps that can allow you to look at each of these pieces and say, okay, now I know how to create my views. Now I know how to enter my data. Now I know which data points I'd like to select. I think a little education goes a long way inside of this thing called Microsoft Project, this tool. So anyway, we're going to open up a blank page, and these are the kinds of things you would see in a blank page. And we began to enter information after that. So what do I mean when I say enter information? Well, here's a view of the task information sheet. Now, if I'm going to put in tab, I put in work, you'll see I've typed some stuff into this. One of the cool things about Microsoft Project is it has at least 3 different ways to do everything. So here's 3 different ways for us to enter data. I can enter data right in my tabular window. I could also enter it into a thing called the task information box, where I double click on that tabular information and it brings up a detailed information box and allows me to enter data in there according to its format. Or I could split the screen, and at the bottom of that screen, I've split it in half. The top half is the tabular data. The bottom half is called a form. There's the task detailed form. So I can enter the data in the detailed form, and as soon as I push the OK button on the detailed form, it writes all of that information up into that tabular data space. There are almost always 3 ways to do everything in Microsoft Project. So if one of these is more comfortable than the other 2, then that's the one you would use. That's how you would design your data input system in order to come in and add information to Microsoft Project. So it's highly customizable, again, when we look at putting information in there. And what information can I put in? somewhere between 1,100 and 1,600 separate and distinct variables to tell the story about that little chunk of work called task 1, task 2, and task 3. Highly customizable. I think easy to use and understand. And then also I says, what if, so we're going to enter the stuff. What other good things happen from having this entering system? Creating consistency using repeatable process. So if the organization uses a particular method, you can set the system up so that it automatically shows you that when you start up. You don't have to keep pushing buttons to get to your favorite place. We can create the system so it comes up in your comfort for data entry. Repeatable process is kind of important in project management. We can save it as a template. Once we put it all together, we can save it. It's my project, but I can also create a template for it so that others, like your friends and family, can share this already defined project and alter it to the specifics of whatever the next project happens to be that's rather similar to the one that I just finished. And so I'm able to create consistency, repeatability, template behaviors, sharing behaviors. All of that is part of Microsoft Project. We're going to go to the scheduling. Remember, we were talking about the network diagram, doing the right things in the right order. And then we were, after we've done the right things in the right order, we were going through this process of scheduling. Here's what scheduling means. It means identifying, ordering, understanding, estimating work, assigning logic, assigning resources, checking for completeness. All of those are part of the process called scheduling. It's the activity you do to put the story, the compelling story together of how you're going to accomplish the work that's defined by the project. When we're finished, we should have a thing called a fully resource loaded schedule. That is the outcome of a scheduling activity. And how do we schedule? We have to think about logic, like mandatory and discretionary. We have to think about series and parallel. We have to think about leads and lags. We have to think about how does work happen. So and I have a diagram here. I've thrown in a page here that says, here's a series of tasks on the right, on the left-hand side. And then there's the picture on the right-hand side, the Gantt chart that represents the chunk of work, how much calendar it will consume, and what completeness we have. If we had resources assigned, who are the assigned resources? It tells me the story of that chunk of work according to the number of data points that I have assigned to that chunk of work. So let's talk about work for just a second, because Microsoft Project supports me in all of these activities. Some work has to happen first A, then B. So you cannot, you cannot send an email that you haven't written yet. So it says, write email, send email. That's a mandatory logic. The order is first A, then B. There are no other ways to get it done. So it helps me understand what that looks like and to define my work according to a mandatory logic process. What if it's discretionary logic? Discretionary says, aha, you can make some choices here. For instance, I like food analogies. So Thanksgiving, we've baked our turkey, and now we're going to carve the turkey and we're going to need to make gravy. So which one of those comes first, which comes second? Well, I can make it my choice whether I carve first or whether I make gravy first. Or you can join me in the kitchen and you do the carving and I'll do the gravy making, and then we can do that at the same time. Series and parallel. Things have to happen in order in time. Things can happen at the same time in time, at about the same time in time. Series, and we have to define all of that in how we get work done in this thing called scheduling. Leads and lags are features that adjust the schedule. That says, lead says start a little early and a lag says wait a little while. So all of these are features in Microsoft Project that allow us to create the compelling story of how we're going to get the work done and what is the significance of each chunk of work with every other chunk of work in the entire network diagram, in the entire thing called a schedule, a Microsoft Project schedule. Microsoft Project is a scheduling engine. This is one of the things that it does better than almost all other systems out there. Getting work and understanding how you're going to accomplish it and looking at all the different ways it can be accomplished, making a decision of how you'd like to do it, putting it into the proper format and saying, here's how I intend to deliver my project, my thing, my process, my methodology. This is how we're going to get it done. So there's a bunch of things that go in here, and all of that's part of the tool as well. It allows me to tell the story and have a picture that says, and here's how we're going to get it all done. Well, before we move into the next process, which says who are the right resources, I want you to see in my little diagram this little arrow there that says we do estimates, then we do resources. But sometimes we do resources and then we do estimates. So for a project that's been done 50 times before, you already know how long it's going to take, about how long it's going to take. And so you can actually define the estimates before you assign the resources. But what if it's a project that's never been done before? Well, we might have to reverse these two steps in our planning mantra and go get the right resources to help us figure out how to perform the proper estimates. So estimates and resources sometimes are reversed in the process simply based on our knowledge of the work. If I already know a lot about the work, I can assign the resources after the estimates. If I don't know a lot about the work, I may need the resources to help me understand the estimates. So that's why there's simple little diagram is there. You would decide that in a project management. Well, Microsoft Project doesn't care. It's still going to figure out it's going to help you get the estimates right, and it's going to help you get the resources assigned as well. So I just want to see there's a process decision here, and Microsoft Project doesn't help you make that decision, but it helps you understand the pieces of that decision. So we talked about estimates. What's the work? How long is it going to take? We've already figured that out. Then we're going to put people into the process. Resources are defined as people and things that do work. So a human puts energy into a process and creates a widget, or cuts the board, or mixes the batter for your cake. So somebody is doing work. But a pickup truck or a dump truck or a wheelbarrow or a shovel can also do work. Now it has some humans touching it, but things can do work. And in software world or in our IT world, often we'll talk about test stands or testing environments. So I put some servers together and I call that test station number 1. That's doing work, because when it's busy testing my software, it can't test your software. And so you'll see that as a resource, there is often a restriction on how much can they do, when can they do it, and how much energy are they providing to accomplish the outcome of that particular task. So people and things that do work are resources. In Microsoft Project, it's not just Fred and Ralph are assigned to the tasks. I have hundreds of data points around each of those resources. There are many, many things I can know about those resources. I can also time phase those resources in Microsoft Project to tell me the story 6 months from now, and then a year from now, what happened to my resource. I'll give you an example. Let's say you work in a company where every year you get a cost of living raise, okay? If for each resource, we could plan that cost of living raise. So if you've got a project that lasted 3 years and you were going to get 2 or 3 cost of living raises, rather going in and adjusting their pay or the amount of money we expected to spend on those resources, we could set that up in the beginning, and it would automatically, on the date defined, trigger the next, their raise. What's their new hourly rate now as we go into this next 6 months or this next 6 months? It's very, very powerful tool that not only helps me understand each of those resources, but some time-phased data about those resources. And it manages that for me, so I don't have to go in and manually manage all that information for all of my resources if I set the system up in the beginning to deal with that fact. Hundreds of variables around each of your people or things that do work. And that diagram is this is the basic tabular, and there's no, in resources, there's no picture data, there's only tabular data. Because we're defining the features of the humans or the work. Also in here, you can have things, you could put in things like, actually there's a resource called a cost resource in Microsoft Project. So I could have travel as a cost resource or printing as a cost resource. And when we go to printing, I already know how much it's going to cost, like per page. I'm going to send 50 pages off. It will do the calculations for me of what it costs for me to do that printing at the specific time defined by where that task is in my schedule. Wonderful, wonderful tool, highly customizable to your needs around what the work is, what are the estimates around the work, who's doing the work, and what is the interface between the humans and the work in order to have a beautiful picture of this project, the thing you're trying to accomplish, and how you plan to accomplish that. And then this is another split window here that basically says we've got tabular data on the top and we have another form at the bottom to fill in specialized data about each of those individual resources that I have in the top information. So again, highly customizable for you to set up the people and the things that do work according to how your organization defines work and defines people and defines time. You also see on the far left-hand side of that little diagram, you'll see the little pictures there. It says calendar and Gantt chart in there. That's actually the view column is turned on, and there's all the different views that are out of the box. And you can actually select on a view, and it will change the picture according to what you're looking. If you're looking at resources, there's a different view set than if you're looking at tasks. And so as you move through the system, it sets you up for success by allowing you the choices that are relevant to the thing that you're looking at the moment. Quite supportive in your ability to do good project management. What problem are we trying to solve? Thing are we trying to create? What are the right things to do in the right order, the right estimates? Is the schedule good enough? That was my next step. So I put all that stuff together. I figured out what the tasks are. I looked at the requirements of my project. I looked at order. I looked at discretionary logic and mandatory logic and leads and lags and series and parallel and relationship of the work, and risk-based planning could be in here. That's also part of Microsoft Project's ability to help you understand how variables like risk can be adjusted for the estimates that you have. So we've done all that stuff. So you see, it says, do we have, under my diagram, it says, do we have the right things to do? Do we have the right order? Do we have the right estimates? Do we have the right people? Do I have a doable, defensible plan? Microsoft Project helps us figure that out. We put it together. My personal experience is that doesn't mean it's right. It means I put it together and I thought I had a good idea, but I forgot something. I left something out. I have a bad logic piece. I forgot to assign resources to a task. When you've got 300-400 tasks in here, it's easy to miss a little piece. And so the schedule validation piece says, let's go back and look and see. In Microsoft Project, we have ways of turning on filters. So I can look and see, are there any tasks that don't have a resource assigned? I need to fix that. Are there any tasks that are outside of my cost behavior? So this is too big, or this is only 10 cents. Do I really need to have a 10-cent cost item and, in a $6 billion project? I began to look at the intelligence of the data that I've collected. And I began to check and see, do I have the right things to do in the right order, the right estimates, and the right people? Does it make sense that I build it intelligently? And is it doable and defensible? Microsoft Project helps us figure all that out and answers the question for you. You have a good schedule, or no, you don't. And there's a lot of supporting documentation in other places that will support you in this too, about how to build a good schedule. But the tool itself helps me make sense of, did I do a good job or not in putting the whole thing together? Is it doable and defensible? And of course, if I was talking about another issue about project management here, if I put it together and I built it, well, of course it's perfect. I like to say, in my schedules, if it was perfect yesterday, well, then today it's perfecter. Because I keep looking at it and it keeps surprising me about how wonderful my work is. Sometimes we get to this step, we need to take our schedule and hand it to a trusted associate and say, look at this for me and see where the holes are, because I can't, I'm a terrible editor of my own work. So sometimes it's helpful to have somebody look over your shoulder in this case. And they, being well versed in project management and in Microsoft Project use, can easily go in and look to see, do we have the right things? Show me all the work. Are they in the right order? What's the logic? Does that make sense? Do I have mandatory? Do I have discretionary? Do I have series? Do I have parallel? Are they correct? What are the right estimates? Where'd you get the numbers? How can I validate that? Are these the right people? Are the resources correct? So someone else can easily use the tool to answer all those questions, just like you used it to build it for this validation step. Now that we've done all that, it says, hey, let's go do work. So if you were going to take a car trip, you're gonna go from point A to point B, how would you know how you're doing? Why, we get a map. And often we put pins in a map, and pins in the map are actually called milestones. And milestones is a way that is one of the things you can actually have in Microsoft Project, or milestone specific markers. And you can say, we should be here by Tuesday, and we should be here by Wednesday, and we're going to have lunch at this point, and we're going to detour off the highway and go to the world's biggest ball of string. When we get into Kansas, we're going from Denver to Kansas City. We're driving across an all-day trip here, and where should we be? What can we see? We get out a map. A baseline is simply a map. It says, here's what you plan to accomplish. Now, once I've figured out what I plan to accomplish, then I go do real work, and I can compare how am I doing to how I thought I would be doing. Baselines are created to measure variance, the difference between planned and actual. So first I need to put a plan together. Then I need to do some work, and I need to check it against the plan. Microsoft Project has a wonderful opportunity for baselining, and actually there's 11 baselines in Microsoft Project. Most of us only use one, sometimes two, but there are 11 different opportunities for saving here's what I plan to accomplish. And we can talk later about how you use all that, but they've given you way more than you need most of the time around the baselining behavior. Cementing the plan. What do we wish to happen? We have lots of ways of capturing that information. And now that we've The right things to do, right over the right people, and the right estimates. Is schedule good enough? Let's go do work. We've finished the planning process. A Microsoft project has helped us every step of the way to do so. Now we need to go do real work. We're going to switch gears and talk about the tracking mantra. Where should I be? Where am I? What's the difference between them? And what am I going to do about it? Is the schedule still valid? Can I still deliver the promise? Tell the story, repeat is our process we're going to have in our tracking mechanism. So how does Microsoft Project help us track? Well, it answers the question, how you doing? And it answers it beautifully. As long as you have a baseline, what did you plan to happen? And you go out and you collect actuals that are defensible. You didn't make up the numbers. People didn't give you false information. We go out and we collect something that we can validate, and we put it in the system, and we let the mathematical model tell us what's the difference between planned and actual. Here's what you thought was going to happen. Here's what's really happening. You have to decide what to do about it. It will help you make some decisions, but it doesn't make those decisions for you. It says, you asked for data, here's your data. Now you need to tell me what we intend to do. All right, so if you look at this diagram, you'll see it's a collection of tasks, but you'll see on the picture side, there are two different bars. The blue bars and the red bars represent work, tasks to be accomplished, okay? The gray bars that are underneath of them represent the baseline. This is called a tracking Gantt. So once I baseline the schedule, I turn on the tracking Gantt and it shows me in a graphic form, here's what you thought was going to happen. And then we can look and see what really happened. So if you look at the schedule, you can see that we're behind schedule. You look up close to the top, we'll see that there was a task up there that has a little bitty gray bar and a long red line. Okay, it took longer than we thought. It didn't start on time. Graphically, you can see exactly how you're doing. You could also use the tabular data and look at variances, or you could look at earned value calculations, or any kind of mathematical model you would like to put in there that says, here's how I track progress. Here's how I know I'm doing okay. The difference between two numbers, in earned value, we have variance and we have indexes where we're going to divide a couple of numbers. We can go in and make a determination in your mathematical model, how you do it, how your organization defines success. Put it in the system and allow the software to tell the story. How you doing? And I just want to show you there's a graphic there that kind of helps us see that. I can show it to you in words and numbers and pictures, or I can show it to you in pictures as well. This is sometimes helpful for those who don't like to see a lot of tabular data, but they like pictures. Good, we've got pictures for them. Answers the question, how you doing? It can also give it to you in multiple formats, like diagrams and graphs and pie charts and many different ways to tell the story of how we're doing and this is part of that three-dimensional process I was talking about, three-dimensional database, in that we can query the database using a three-dimensional modeling technique. It's already built into the system, and then create graphs on top of that to have beautiful pictures, either two-dimensional pictures or even three-dimensional pictures around whatever question you want to ask of the database relative to the data that you have in there. And we can go put pictures together and see exactly what's happening. Helps us make good decisions. It helps us help other people understand what's going on and how and why we would make a certain either business decision or a contract decision or a resource decision. We have analytical information that will help us tell the story accurately, intelligently, and help us be good decision makers from a project perspective. And this is almost an unlimited window. It's a three-dimensional database of mine. How many different mathematical models can I put together? I think the opportunities appear to be endless of how many different ways you can tell the story. So Microsoft Project is extremely helpful in not only helping us get a good plan together and helping us understand where we are, but are a compelling opportunity to tell the story to others and to ourselves of how we're doing and how we might need to make additional decisions to adjust the outcome of the project or to change the resources, to look at the cost. Whatever it is you're concerned about, we can put graphs, pictures and graphs and stories together to help us understand it and make good business decisions. In the last process, we get to the closing of the process. When we get to the closing of the process, it says, okay, you've successfully, that's your gold medallion, that you've achieved the goal, you've reached the end of the race, you've accomplished the project, it's a successful outcome, but we're not finished. I delivered the promise to the customer, but what's the benefit to me or to my organization that we used Microsoft Project? There's historical data, it's captured, it's already in your database. Here's what we did and here's how it worked for us. So anyone else should be able to go and look at the historical data about what did we do on this project. I can use it as lessons learned. I can share it with the organization, say, here's what my project looks like, and you've got something similar to this. You can use my data, repeatable process, through templates and repeatable process. And the organization gets smarter because we have those tools in place. We have cost comparison. So I did this project 2 years ago. What's the difference between the time we did it 2 years ago and now? How can we look at things like resources and cost and contracting and materials? And I have that ability, if I have this captured, if I've closed the project intelligently, that data is still available to me to make all kinds of comparisons around all of those 1,100 to 1,600 variables. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. We can look at the resource information and see how effective resources were and whether we would wish to use those resources again on another project. Effectiveness, efficiencies, cost behaviors, all of that could be captured and understood in the closing of a project to help us do what we do better, faster, cheaper in the future. And what we hope happens is we have happy customers and clients. They told us what the big idea was, we accomplished it for them, and now we have happy customers and clients, along with repeatable process, historical data, lessons learned, templates, and comparison techniques and good business decision models for our future projects. So that was a lot of information in a fast fire format. What questions do you have? Remember, all we're doing is looking in the window and seeing the product. We're not able to go in and touch it yet. This is an introduction to Microsoft Project. What questions do you have?
Looks like someone's asking about the cost for project. You have any ideas on that?
If you're going to go buy the product, there are multiple ways to do that. And some organizations, at least in my experience, will purchase it for, you work for a company, the company wants to use the product, so it could come that way. I'm trying to think, sometimes you can purchase it through an educational opportunity for, I think it's somewhere between $200 and $300 And then it's going to be between 400, I think, and 900. It's been a while since I bought a product, and I think the last time I bought it, I spent $400, I believe, for it. But how you get it, when you get it, what's the latest version, all of that plays into the costing behavior. So my guess is somewhere between $0 and $1,000 is are the opportunities for purchasing it. Sorry, I wasn't planning on selling the product. I just use it. And if I can
And
get somebody to buy it for me, then that's someplace I'd like to go to.
and I think this is one that hasn't moved to a software as service sort of model yet. So I think this is one that you buy it and you have it, not like Adobe or even Office 365 where you have to pay a monthly fee. So I mean, it seems
No,
like
it's just purchase. It's just purchase right now. Yes.
yeah, so it seems like a large amount, but then you just own it. It's not like a monthly fee. So
Right. Now, again, if you're just all by yourself doing this, you have to. Like, I'm an independent consultant. Gaines and Associates is a huge training conglomerate, which means me and my cat Sophie run the whole company. For me, it's a pretty big expense, but then when I'm using it for my customers and they're paying me, it ends up I'm easily able to pay for it. If I was just going to play with this is a pretty expensive product to sit around and just play with. So you would need to have a compelling reason to use it because it is expensive. There's no doubt about it.
I can take the question that just came into the Q&A. So for those of you who are looking for certification for school, there's an email that gets sent the day after this webinar, and that email is the certification that you'll need. We don't have certificates per se. We just send out an email. So that if you're looking for a certification for school, that's what that is. All right. Do we have any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Oh, here we go. Can you
Yes.
use this towards any type of project?
Yes, Microsoft Project doesn't really care what problem you're trying to solve or issue, thing you're trying to create. It doesn't care. As long as we have the right things doing right over the right estimates, the right people, is the schedule good enough? Let's go do work. As long as we put that process together, it will support you in any kind of project. I suggest to people who are trying to use it for the first time, usually it's at a work setting, but if you have it available to you, do something simple like how are we going to clean out the garage this week? Should we get the garden ready for summer, winter, fall, whatever? How am I going to have the yard work accomplished? Somebody's having a wedding. How could I plan that? We're going to have a bake sale at the college. There's a ton of opportunities for you to go and play with creating this idea of the right things doing right over the right people and the right estimates, and use this tool to support you. And I think you'll find it comforting and supportive if you begin to use it in a non-threatening environment before it actually becomes important for the boss is standing over your shoulder saying how you doing with that project. And so I suggest that we go there. Let me turn on my very last slide, and oops, I've gotten that all wrong. Let me get over here. Okay. I'm a PMP. I'm a project management professional. I'm certified project manager. I'm all of those silly acronyms behind my name. I'm a modern classroom certified trainer. So I'm supposed to be knowledgeable about this virtual environment that we're doing here. And ATP says that I'm an authorized training partner. So I'm authorized to train other people to be PMPs through a PMI. I'm live in Northeast Florida. I provide you with an email address. If there's questions that I can answer in the future, you're more than willing. I'll do everything I can to support you. I am passionate about this business of project management. Whatever I can do to help you, I would be more than willing to support you. It's been my pleasure. I'm hoping this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Herm, thanks for being with us, and I hope that we'll have you back again. Any last thoughts, any questions before we all leave for the day? Doesn't look like it. So everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for attending.
My pleasure. Enjoy your afternoon or morning, wherever it happens to be in the world.